So, had some fun with Dano, been able to talk, but if we could have your attention, we're going to go ahead and we're going to kind of just jump in to tonight's story. And I hope that you listen. I hope that you pay attention. Because what I want to tell you before Dano starts is, with Dano's story and what he's going to tell you tonight, understand that through this entire thing, he was very secure in his faith with the Lord. One thing that Dano has always been is he's always been very outspoken about his message of Jesus and his faith. And so, Dano, I'm going to have you just kind of kick us off and tell us how did this all begin?
Yeah. So I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to tell, I always say my story, but really it's not my story. It's God's story and what he's been able to do, what I've been able to do through him and what he's been able to do through me. So it always starts at the very beginning. We're kind of going to go through a little bit of a timeline of my whole life to get to this point where we are today. And it all starts from the time I was born. And when I was born, I mean, geez, good-looking kid, right?
That's a good-looking kid.
Yeah, so when I was born in the early 80s, of course, my parents didn't know anything was going to be wrong with me when I was born. They didn't have the ultrasounds and things like that to be able to tell. But what happened was once I was born, my dad noticed that there were a couple of issues going on. One in particular, that my legs were crippled. So if you can imagine your calf and your thigh, mine were connected together. So they were connected all the time. So everywhere I went, my legs, I was just never able to walk, you know. And my dad noticed it first, and he's like, wow, we really got an issue here. This is going to be something that we're going to have to really overcome. And the doctors at that point were like, they didn't really know what to call what I had, and they were kind of trying to figure out exactly what was going on. So they were doing tests and things like that. And they ended up coming out with that I had spina bifida. So it's a birth defect that happens when you're in your mom's stomach, that some of the nutrients and things like that she doesn't get. So that causes some of the orthopedic issues and things like that to happen. So I was born, and the doctors were like, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if he's ever going to be able to hold his head up. We don't know if he'll ever be able to move. Obviously, he's probably never going to be able to walk. But just take him home and see how he does. And it was kind of a waiting game to see what I was going to do. So we move on here. You can see, it's kind of hard to see with the lights, but you can see my legs there are crippled there. And pretty soon, I was going from holding my head up to crawling and sitting up. And then pretty soon I was on everything in the house.
Yeah.
You know, I had two older brothers, and they were treating me just like anybody else would have little brothers or siblings. And we were just on everything. I would climb up on the counter, and my mom and dad would make me do dishes and things like that, you know. And pretty soon I was just like one of them, you know. And that was really impactful in the beginning, is my parents just treating me like one of their other children. They didn't put any limitations on me. They didn't say that you can't do this. They always said, hey, you try on your own, and then you decide if you can't do it. And that was something that I really admire them now. And, you know, at the time it was a lot harder, but now I respect that. And that's, you know, if I have a kid or whatever, I would be treating them the same way. Just like, hey, you got to try everything on your own. Don't let anybody put those limitations on you, you know?
Yeah. So your brother's growing up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So treated you exactly the same way.
Yeah. So my brothers, being older, they would pick on me all the time. So and this is like, it's crazy. But my older brother, he was about 5 years older than me. And when he would get mad at me, because I would make him angry, I would go steal stuff out of his room or whatever, and we'd always fight and things like that, you know. When he got mad at me, he would actually take me out in the middle of the street, and he would take my wheels off and leave me in the middle of the street.
Take your wheels off.
Take my wheels off. And like, I'd be like, Mom! I'd be crying for Mom and everything like that, you know. Now, I'd only be out there for like a minute.
Yeah.
And it's not like Pleasant Valley Boulevard now. This is like the neighborhood street, you know.
Yeah.
So they would scream for Mom. He'd get in a lot of trouble for my mom. But he'd give me my wheels back, and then I would be all right.
Got you. I mean, just like any other brothers would be picking on each other.
Exactly.
And so you come in, you're born into this world. Your dad recognizes, hey, something's not going on. The doctors diagnose you with this. You beat what they say. Like they're saying you'll never be able to do this, that, and by this time you're crawling, You're able to move around. You're very mobile.
Right.
And then things are going pretty normal for you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm in kindergarten, first grade, going to school, riding the short bus,
Yeah.
because it had the wheelchair lift and things like that. So I was going to school and making friends and everything like that. And then second grade came, and my parents went to I was going to Shriners Hospital at the time, and they approached them and they said, hey, as he's growing, his spine, because of all these issues that he was born with, he doesn't have enough room for his organs to grow. And so they were thinking that there's going to have to be a major surgery they're going to have to do to make me taller.
Okay.
And that's what they decided to do. So I was 6 years old when they decided if we could move on to the next one. Oh, that's just another one of me crawling around. We go to one more slide here. And then, so here it is, okay. So we get to the point where they decide they're going to have to do the surgery, and it's a major surgery that's only been done one other time in the world.
So this is the second time this surgery has ever been done in the world.
In the entire world. So they gather all these doctors from different hospitals, and they bring me in, and they're trying to discuss what they're going to do and how they're going to make me taller, how they're going to really rebuild my spine. Because the spina bifida, what happens was that the spine was only half grown. So at the bottom, from the top to the bottom, I had a missing part. So it wouldn't grow. It wasn't connected. So they decided that they were going to do this major surgery, and what they're going to do is they're going to take my leg off, take my tibia bone, the long bone in your leg, and that they were going to rebuild my spine out of my leg bone.
Wow.
Yeah. So they decided to do this, and I'm 6 years old, so I don't know really what's going on. I'm in an auditorium similar to this, and I'm like crawling around and all that, and these doctors up here, they're discussing how they're going to do this major surgery and how they're going to amputate my legs off, and I still didn't really grasp it. My mom and dad explained to me that you're just going to have surgery, and I didn't understand, and they're like, well, we're going to take your legs and rebuild you a backbone is how they described it to me, and I didn't know anything really was different until I had the surgery, and then I woke up. And I woke up, and I knew that, well, obviously there was something missing, and something had changed in my life. And I knew that it was going to be totally different from that point on, that I wasn't going to be the kid in the wheelchair or that looked different. It was going to be the kid with no legs. And how are people going to treat me then,
Yeah.
And if we move on to the next one, it shows me, okay, so that's the rod that they put in. I actually have one. I'll show you guys real quick. So not this particular rod, but one similar to it, is how they built my spine with my leg. So they would attach the top to the top of the spine, and then they would put the leg bone in, and then they had another clamp at the bottom, and they would hold it all together. And so it took about 9.5 hours for them to do the surgery, take both legs off. They used one leg, and then they ended up saving the other one, and it's in a bone bank at the hospital. They froze it.
Okay.
Just in case I would need to get another surgery, be any taller, they'd be able to use my same bone again.
Wow.
So I get through the surgery, I wake up, the legs are missing, of course. I noticed that it's going to be a totally different ride for me. I knew that things were going to be different from then on. And then, as I'm coming home from the hospital, they decide that I have to be in this body cast. And this is one of my actual body casts that I have.
Yeah.
From when I was 6 years old, and I was in this thing for about a year.
A year?
A year, yeah.
Wow.
So I got released from the hospital, and they decided that they're going to have to support this new spine they built. So they had originally put me in a plaster cast like you would get if you break your foot or something like that, or your wrist or arm. And then I was going through them so much that they decided to make me one a little bit more durable and make it out of plastic.
Wow.
Because I was still crawling around,
Yeah.
I was still.
This is 7, 8 years old?
This is 6 years old.
6 years old.
Yeah. So I'm in like second grade, going into second grade, and I'm just hanging out in this body cast now and trying to recover and trying to get through all that. And then my parents are like, well, it's time to go back to school, And I'm like, how am I going to go back to school with all this? I did. And then it was kind of going through those tough times as being a kid, and I'm sure you guys can relate to this, as being the kid in the wheelchair, that I wasn't always, included in a lot of things,
Wow.
and people would make comments and things like that. And I remember, I got to back up a little bit here. My parents always instilled in me, what it says in Psalms, that you're perfectly and wonderfully made. Through this whole thing, my parents had their incredible faith that got them through this, obviously.
Yeah.
They knew from the beginning that it was going to be a difficult road for me, but they knew that God was going to get them through it, and then through their faith, they was going to help me get through all the issues that I was going to have. And not knowing what those issues would all be, but, as they came along, it just grounded them more in their faith and able to get through those things. Yeah. So getting back to elementary school, so I would go to recess and I would, I'm trying to push myself in my wheelchair, and people are not being so nice to me, and they don't really include me in a lot of things. And I remember going home, and they're telling me about God, stuff like that at home, and I'm going to Sunday school, and I'm learning all these stories about Jesus and what the stories that he's done for other people, and how he heals people, and how in Matthew, how they took their friend to see Jesus, and he was a lame man, and he was able to walk afterwards, Yeah. And I'm like, well, where's this Jesus at now? How do I get this Jesus to heal me and give me my legs back so I can be like everybody else, Wow. And I remember going home and laying in bed, and I was just crying, because I had a really rough day. And I'm like, Lord, thinking God is a magician, And I'm like, Lord, just give me my legs back. Just right now, if you just give me my legs back, it'd be so awesome, just like you said in the Bible, And I'd say amen and look down, and nothing changed, Yeah. So it was at a young age that I learned, about how you can rely on God. And God is this most powerful person that's done all these things for all these people. But I had to know that I had to rely on my faith, that he was going to give me the tools, give me the ability to get through things in my own way. Yeah. And through him, that I was going to be able to overcome these things. And soon enough, I was. This was one of the first major things that happened, but there was going to be many more things that I was going to have to rely on in my faith to get through. So this is a article that I came home from the hospital. I get through all that. Then I start getting, go ahead, you can go to the next one. And I'm getting all active again, and I'm learning how to snow ski. I lived out west at the time. Okay. So they built me a special ski that you actually sit in a little sled that's positioned up on top of a ski, and then you have two outriggers to help you balance and turn.
Oh, wow.
So I was able to ski, and I was able to play some baseball and things like that with my brothers, of course. Of course, they were always including me in all those things as well, Yeah. So even though sometimes you're left out at school, I still had those brothers that would always include me in things.
Yeah. Well, I think it speaks to all of us to not be included in something at some point.
Yeah, for sure.
And to hear and to sit with Dano and to hear him talk over the years and to hear him talk just one-on-one, and even tonight, even the reality is the same for you. Mm-hmm. Just wanting to be included, wanting to be like everybody else, wanting to be someone that says, hey, I just want to be like everyone else. Mm-hmm. But then your parents telling you, no, God made you specifically the way that he wants you to be. The Bible says in this verse that you are fearfully and wonderfully made. So exactly who you are and exactly how you are, he's created you this. Now, yes, he's given you the freedom. Right. You can have the right attitude. Yeah. You can make decisions to make faith decisions or sinful decisions.
Sure.
But he gives you this dynamic ability to be able to trust and believe in him.
Right.
And so you learn how to ski. You're playing sports.
Yeah.
You're kind of doing a little bit of everything.
Right, right. Then comes another challenge.
Then comes the next challenge.
Yeah. So when I was 9 years old, I was in a house fire. My mom was ran a daycare out of the house, and my brother was home. He had missed the school bus. My other brother was at school, and my mom was like, "Hey, I was homesick. I'm sorry. Let me get this right. I was homesick. My brother had missed the bus, and my other brother was at his high school. Yeah. And I'm sitting there, and we had a wood stove. We lived out west. This is like late November. And the paper box that you have to, like, your kindling and things like that to start the fire, my mom had left and went to drop my brother off at school, and I noticed this paper box was smoldering. My brother had just restocked the fire, put new wood and things like that in it. And something had gotten bumped from inside the wood stove outside, and it started smoldering in this box. And now, if you can imagine, I'm at home alone, and at this point, I'm not really able to climb in my wheelchair by myself yet. I'm just, I'm mostly on the ground, And I see this box on fire, and I go over, and I'm like, I'm going to put it out. So I go over, and I take a pillow from the couch, and I go over, and I hit this firebox, and I'm hitting this kindling box, and it's just making it way worse. Yeah. And it's getting bigger and bigger. And then finally it caught the wall on fire, and it caught the entertainment center on fire, the window, the ceiling, and the whole house is full of smoke. So luckily I'm still on the ground, but the house is filling up with smoke, and I'm like, I got to get out of the house. So I'm crawling around the house trying to get to the doors and everything. I can't reach the doorknobs to open the door.
Wow.
And I'm like, well, I got to call somebody. So I called my neighbor's house. Of course, now listen, you guys always get out of the house, or you call 911 first. Don't call the neighbor, just call 911. But so I call the neighbor. Nobody answers the door, or nobody answers the phone. Yeah. And I'm like, where are you guys? Like, somebody answer the phone. I'm going to burn up, in this fire. And at this point, the whole living room was on fire. They was like moving across the living room into like the kitchen, dining room area. And I called 911, and I'm like, hey, my house is on fire. And they're like, well, you need to get out of the house. And I'm like, well, I can't. I don't have any legs. I can't open the door. I don't know how I'm going to get out. They're like, well, you have to get out. I'm like, I can't. Yeah. So I'm like crawling around the house, trying to find any way to get out of the house, looking at windows and trying to climb on things or whatever. And I can't get out of the house. So I go to the back of the house, and we have a sliding glass door. Yeah. And the sliding glass door, if you know, it has like a little latch on it to like flick it, open it and close it. You pull it to unlock it. And I'm trying to unlock that latch to open the door. And I'm like leaning on one hand and pulling up and basically climbing the wall, trying to flick open this latch to open the sliding glass door. And finally the door actually does open. I'm able to flick it with the tip of my finger and open the door. And I slide open this big heavy door, and I get out on the back porch. And about maybe 3-4 minutes later, the firefighters come and all that. They put the fire out. They pick me up, of course, take me around to the front of the house, and I get through that. Yeah. So, now we've gone from losing your legs and being different to now overcoming this, a really scary time in my life, and what God has brought me through already. And I'm starting to develop this stronger faith in who God is and how he's going to be able to protect me and everything that comes along in life, at a young age. And this is 9 years old. So the next day, of course, this is all in the newspaper and everything. And that's what you saw. That was the actual newspaper article that they published the next day. And then a few weeks later, I get contacted by an author, and they want to pick up my story, and they write a children's book about it. And they talk about fire safety and things like that, and talk about my story. Yeah. And this comes out about a year after the actual fire. And it's pretty cool because it gives me an opportunity to tell my story in schools and things like that and share it with kids. So we can talk a little bit about fire safety, but also overcoming those obstacles and telling them in my story too. Yeah. So it's a good tool to have to be able to get into to other places that you can't necessarily talk about your faith, but you can talk about what a good attitude and overcoming obstacles is all about.
So literally, this is like all before you are 10 years old.
Yeah.
That you're already dealing with the surgery.
Right.
The wanting to be accepted but not being able to, wanting to fit in and it not happening. So now you're faced with probably what could be one of the worst fears. Right. Is trapped in a burning building that you have no way out. Right. And that fear. Right. And so in all of these things, again, like you said, that your faith was strong, knowing that through every situation. Because you literally think about this, guys. Like, you're probably thinking, okay, how much worse can my life get?
Right.
What worse could happen? How much? What else is going to happen in my life? And then it happens.
Yeah, it's always something comes along, and I always tell people now, I say, well, I'm thankful for those things because it makes my story a little bit longer, and it gives people more opportunity to see how awesome God is and what he's been able to bring me through. Yeah. And if I didn't have all that, maybe I just have one thing or whatever, but it just shows how powerful God is. And when you let him take control of your life and put all your faith in him, how it just it's amazing what he can do and the things that he can help you overcome, small and big.
Yeah.
There's those little days that you wake up and you don't feel like getting up and you have a bad attitude or whatever, to getting through a house fire or major surgery. Everything that you have to rely on God and your faith, and he'll get you through it. You know.
Well, and that's what's so great about God, is that we serve a God that cares about the little details and the big details,
Right.
the littlest situation to the biggest situation. And this is what we've been teaching you guys, is this element of faith to have in God, that he does care about that. Hey, I don't want to wake up because I'm going to have a bad day, but guess what? He's there with you to, in the midst of a fire, not sure if you're going to even make it, he's there with you. So we get to this point, the story's written about a year later.
Yep.
Things start to go better.
Yeah, we're getting good. Everything's
and you're becoming a teenager.
Yeah, right. I'm starting middle school, and I'm learning how to drive. And
why don't we explain to everybody how that works?
All right. So I went to driving school to learn how to do it, but it's what I have is I have a metal bar that runs down to the gas and the brake, and then I have a handle that runs underneath my steering wheel, and I use that to control the gas pedal and the brake pedal. So they're attached to each pedal, but there's like extensions basically. And you don't want to mess it up. You don't want to confuse the gas and the brake. But that's why I went to school, because it took me a little while to get used to that. But then I'm, in and out kind of thing is how I control my car. And I'm able to get in and out. I have a Jeep now, so I'm able to get in and out of the back of it. Yeah. Put my wheelchair in and things like that.
So if some of you have seen Dano when he pulls in his Jeep, you see he'll puts the hatch back up. It goes out. He jumps to the back. Puts his chair out, jumps out, closes it down, boom, it's done. Yep. But if you've never been on a ride with Dano, Dan and I go for rides, and we'll drive from Hollidaysburg to Tyrone and just talk about God and talk about life and enjoy it. And so you learn how to drive.
I learn how to drive, and then we get to this next part here. So I have these metal rods in my back, and I start getting some pains in my lower back.
At what age was this?
This is 15.
15.
I'm sorry, this is 16. I just started driving. So I'm having some lower back pain. I go to the doctor. He's like, you have a kidney infection. He's like, just take some Tylenol, give an antibiotic, you'll be okay. And I'm like, no, this is like serious pain. And it doesn't get any better. And I go like 4 days. And finally I go to the hospital and I get an x-ray taken. And what we find out is that the metal rod they put in my back when I was 6 had come undone. So that hook that was on the bottom actually came undone from my spine, and then it was digging into my back.
Wow.
But the doctors thought I had just a kidney infection until they saw the x-ray. Then my dad's like, oh, no, this is not supposed to look like this.
And so that's what we're seeing on the right side of the screen, correct?
Yeah.
Is that
this is before, so if you look at that bottom hook there on the right, on the very bottom there, if that's not attached, you can imagine that trying to come out your back. And that's the pain I felt.
Wow.
So I had to go back into the hospital, and they decide that they're going to take out this rod. And they go in, and they take out the bottom half. The top half of my spine, the bone had already grown over it. Okay. So they decided to leave it. And they cut the bottom half off, take it out, and then they find that it's all infected. My entire spine is infected. So it's really weak. It's there's a lot of it's a very scary time that they're thinking that this infection could get my bloodstream, make me very sick, things like that. And they decide that they have to clean out this infection, that they have to get all the bad bacteria and things that are on my spine. They have to go in and clean it out.
Wow. And
I spent 2 weeks in the hospital going to the OR, the operating room, every other day, getting my back cleaned out.
So put that in perspective. 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Every other day surgery.
Every other day going to surgery. Yeah.
I believe we have a picture. Don't we have a picture?
So if we go.
This is going to be a little bit graphic.
Yeah. So if you don't like gross stuff, you don't want to look at this. But if you like gross stuff, this picture's right up your alley.
Go ahead and put that up. So that is the hole in your back.
Yeah.
That is about this big.
And that's
that's what they're cleaning out.
Yeah. And I'm wide awake. Like, I'm not asleep at this point. Like, this is me laid in my hospital bed. My dad took this picture. Yeah. And they would go in and clean it out. and then they would pack it with gauze and things like that. They'd send me back to my room, you can take that picture down if you want. And so I get back to my room, and then they have to change that gauze out that night, and then the next day send me back to the OR to do it again. So it was a horrible experience, but again, this is another time where, like you said, that you're waiting on the Lord to deliver you from this bad problem that you think you're in, and you're like, why is this happening to me, God? But I was still able to think, hey, God, you had brought me through this house fire. You'd already brought me through my major surgery that I didn't really understand, but you'd got me to this point where I'm 16, and I know that you're going to be able to get me through this too.
Yeah.
So if we skip ahead a little bit, I end up getting out of the hospital. I go home, and I'm on antibiotics for like 9 months.
Wow.
I'm sorry, not 9 months, 9 weeks of
Okay.
antibiotics and stuff, trying to clean that all up and everything like that.
Yeah.
So that finally gets healed.
Let's go to the slide after the surgery.
So, all right. So I get through that. I'm like 17, 18 years old. My family decides that we're going to move to Pennsylvania, and I'm going to start going to school at Penn State.
Okay.
And I'm at my friend's house one day, and it's really warm outside, and my friend's grandmother's there, and she's taking her blood pressure.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, that's cool. Let me take my blood pressure, see what it is.
Yeah.
And I take it, and it's like 130 over 100, And I'm like, she's like, that's kind of high for you. And I'm like, I don't really know what mine is or what it's supposed to be. But she's like, just come in and relax for a little bit, and we'll check it again. So I go and I wait a little bit, and I go and check it again. And then it's like 190 over 120. So it keeps going up like every couple minutes,
Yeah.
And I check it again, and then it's like 240 over like 180.
Wow.
And so I call my doctor, and I'm like, calling the doctor, and I'm like, hey, I said, my blood pressure is a little high, give him the numbers, and he's like, you need to come to the emergency room right now.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, well, I felt okay. I'm like, I'll drive in, and I'll meet you there, and we'll take care of it. Well, I get driving down the road, and I call my friend who's a nurse, and I'm like, hey, I said, my blood pressure is this, and they want me to go to the hospital. What do you think? And he's like, yeah, you got to go now. Like, you got to get to the hospital right now. And I'm like, all right, man, I am. And as I'm talking to him, everything just goes in super slow motion. And I'm trying to, talk to him, and I can't get the words out. And I'm like, blah, and I'm just like, I need you, that kind of thing, And he's yelling in the phone, and I can understand what he's saying, but I can't communicate back to him.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'll be right there. Where are you? And I'm like, I don't know where I am, but I mean, I'm at my friend's house, but I can't relay that to him.
Yeah.
So he ends up calling 911. They find me along the side of the road. I end up pulling over, and because I was on the way to the hospital, and the ambulance comes, and they get there. At this point, I can't communicate at all. I can't move, and I can't talk.
Wow.
And they're saying that instead, I was in Bedford at the time, so I'm like 40 miles close to it away. And they decided, well, we're not going to go with an ambulance, we're going to call a helicopter for you. And I'm trying to communicate with these these flight nurses and things like that, trying to tell them what's going on, and I can't, and I'm getting frustrated because in my mind, I can still think, but I can't communicate.
Wow.
And finally, they pick me up in the helicopter, and they take me over to UPMC. And at this point, they called my family and friends and all that to get there. And they show up about the same time I get there. It takes 5 minutes to fly from Bedford to Altoona in a helicopter.
Yeah.
That's pretty quick.
That's pretty fast, yeah.
So I get there, my family's all there, and they're coming in to see me, and they're telling me that they love me and things like that. And I can't tell them I love them. And I can't tell them anything. And it is the most heart-wrenching thing to be laying in the hospital, not being able to communicate, not being able to talk.
So your thoughts are there, your process is there, your thinking's fine.
I'm thinking.
But you just cannot literally,
I can't
physically
get it out. Yeah.
Get that out.
And my brother's just try to write it. And I couldn't even move my hands to write, And what they find is that I had a stroke.
So it's 17 years old.
No,
16.
this is 20.
At 20 years old having a stroke.
I'm up here going to Penn State at the time.
Wow.
And I'm there, and they determine that I have a stroke, and they decide that they're going to fly me again from Altoona to Pittsburgh. And I'm laying there in this bed, and I'm just, again, praying and praying that, God, I need you to heal me here. Just give me the ability to talk again.
Yeah.
Let me tell my family that I love them, and I couldn't. And it was, I wouldn't wish it on anybody. I mean, it was a really low time and a hard time to get through. But they ended up flying me to Pittsburgh, and it took about 4 days. About 4 days, I could finally say like a word.
Yeah.
And then I could say like 3 words. And then finally I could say like a sentence, and then things were really starting to come back and everything like that. And then finally I was able to talk, and then I went through a little bit of therapy and things like that and be able to move again.
Yeah.
So another situation where God had brought me through, in a miraculous way, got me through where my, from losing my legs to the stroke to the house fire, to my spine infection. This is just another example of how God is going to work in my life,
Yeah. And I think the one thing that you and I have talked about that I would like you to kind of share a little bit with, what was your thought process going through this fact that you're with your loved ones, they're scared, you're scared. You obviously at some point can realize that you can't communicate.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with that fear?
I tell you what, I knew that if I called out to God that he was going to get me through. He's going to give me the strength to get through whatever was in my way. Whatever he had brought me to, he was going to bring me through.
Yeah.
But I have to say, at that point, I wasn't doubting, but I was waiting for God to show up in that moment.
Yeah.
And I'm laying there and I'm just praying and thinking, Lord, just give me 5 minutes. Just let me tell them I love them so they know,
Yeah.
And it just took those extra few days, and I mean, I'm talking 3 days that I couldn't communicate, that you're just waiting for that, where are you, God? You're gonna heal me? When is it coming? Those things. And of course he did. And that's why it's so important, I think, to tell my story to everybody, because it's something that God has brought me through, and hopefully it shows where God is and how God can show up in your life and do awesome things.
Yeah. And so, it reminds me about how, in the Bible, we have people and we see them in these tough situations and they cry out to God and they cry out to God. It reminds me of the Israelites in Exodus. It said they cried out to God, but they felt like God wasn't there. They felt like God wasn't hearing them.
Right.
But God is always there. He's always in existence. And a lot of times we feel like if we don't see or if we don't feel or if something major doesn't happen spiritually, that God isn't listening to us. But what we have to understand is, like, when there's a silence doesn't mean absence.
Right.
The silence of God doesn't mean the absence of God. When we're in a situation and we're dealing with something where we don't think that God is listening, he is doing something. He is working. He's moving.
Yeah.
And even in the midst of a fear situation that you are dealing with, he's still doing something.
Right.
Because it not only took the faith of you, but of your brothers, of your parents, of everything to be in cooperation with that, to say, hey, we have to depend on our faith to get us through this. Because in some situations that we face, guys, listen to me, all you will have will be your faith. Mm-hmm. There will be nights, there will be situations, there will be circumstances that you find yourself in where the only thing that you have to rely on is your faith in Jesus. And knowing
That's so
that.
true. Yeah.
So at this point, this is like
heavy.
This is heavy, but this is even in your life though. This is like, this is only halfway of the story. Right. This is just halfway of what, Dano has been through, what he has gone through. He's in college now, and he is in this journey to not just heal physically, but emotionally and mentally from this whole process.
Right. I mean, it's a journey, and every little thing that God has brought me through, like I said, it just magnifies that faith, and it makes it more easy to call on him, that once you've been through something, that God is going to, like I said, show up and is going to get you through it. And the people always say this, God's not going to give you more than you can handle. Well, it comes pretty close, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And but he always is there to get me through it. And I think he gives you that strength and that mental capacity to overcome those things, but also to say, all right, God, I know that what you've done for me before, and I just have to put my faith in you that I'm going to be able to get through this, And then when he does, man, it's the greatest praise and worship time you've ever had, because you're like, thank you, Lord, that you were able to get me through these tough times.
Yeah, because it's a season.
Yeah.
It's a season of your life. And being a Christian, we say it all the time, and you guys hear me say it all the time. Deciding to follow Jesus is the easiest decision. It's a yes or no. But it's the hardest decision you'll ever live out. Because you literally it's putting faith into action and believing, okay, God, in this season is extremely difficult, but I know there's another season coming.
Right.
The now that we are in, this now moment is difficult and it's hard, but there is a then that is coming that is better than the now. In Ephesians, it talks about, that there's this reflection. It's a puzzling reflection in the mirror, and the now doesn't make sense. But there will come a then that will be here, that will make sense for us, that God is going to do. But we have to have faith in this now, just like you had to have faith in the now, in every situation that you have dealt with through this. Yeah. But now, at this point in life, things begin to take a very good turn.
Right. Yep, so I'm able to get through school. And
so you made it through college?
Made it through college by this much, but made it through. And then if we could go to the next slide here. Then I start working, and I get my first full-time job, and I actually start selling wheelchairs. This is what I do for a living, and that's what I do now. So, God has brought me in to meet these awesome people and give me an opportunity. I started at the bottom there and just did some filing and things like that, and then ended up being a director with the company and things like that. So,
and you've been with Dick's Home Care for
about 12 years now.
12 years now. Yeah. And also, just a thank you to Dick's Home Care, because Dick's Home Care actually sponsors Refuge monthly. And they are an organization that believe in what we do, and they believe in this.
Right, for sure.
And Randy's done an incredible job being just a leader in not just what he does. He puts his money where his mouth is, in his faith and his actions. Right. And in that. And so you get a normal job.
Yeah.
And you begin
go
to
work. Go to work every day, 9 to 5, and it just so happened to work out that I work in a field that I know a little bit about, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool. I get to go to hospitals, and I get to talk to people that are getting new wheelchairs and things like that, or people that are, have accidents or whatever, and I get to, share my faith with those people, but also, as a business, I get to help them out as well. Yeah. So it's a pretty cool thing that the opportunity that I've had to be able to do that, you know? So then we get to another problem, and that was just this about 3 years ago. Everything's going fine. Everything's going well. I'm actually traveling. I'm going, seeing people. My friends live in Florida, South Carolina.
You fly all over the place.
I do like to go.
All over the United States.
I like to travel. So I had gone away for a weekend to South Carolina, and I had gotten there, and I looked at my hands, and I noticed that my hands were a little puffy. And I look in the mirror, and I look, and my eyes are puffy. And I'm like, oh, what's going on? And my friend's a nurse, and I'm like, hey, I said, what do you think's going on here? And she's like, oh, it's just from flying. Yeah. I said, you were just flying. I said, fluids move around. You'll be fine. Don't worry about it, And I'm like, all right, well, it didn't get any better. The next day, I'm a little bit more puffy, Yeah. And I was there for the weekend, and I flew home. And I got home, and then I started getting sick. And I went to the doctor, and he's like, you're in kidney failure. And I'm like, what? Like, what are you talking about? And he's like, well, you're retaining all this fluid. And I said, your kidneys aren't working. And if you guys know anything about kidneys, it's an organ in your body that filters your blood, and it takes all the fluid out. And that way you can go to the bathroom and get rid of all the bacteria and bad things that are in your blood. And then it also controls your blood pressure and some bunch of other things and all the minerals and things like vitamins in your body. So it's a very important organ to have. And when it doesn't work properly, it's not good. Yeah. So I'm like, well, what do we do? And they're like, well, let's just make sure everything how it is or whatever. And they do a biopsy of the kidney, and they find out that the kidney's gone. Like it's deteriorating. It's actually falling apart. Wow. And it's not only not working, but it's not functioning at all. And so they decide that I'm going to need a kidney transplant. Yeah. And I'm like, all right, so what all does this entail? And they're like, well, we can put you on dialysis, which is an artificial way that they clean that blood, take out all that fluid. And they hook you up to a machine for about 4 hours a day. Yeah. And they clean out, it's every other day, and they clean out that blood and the fluid and things from you. Yeah. But and the other thing is then I start looking for a kidney transplant.
Yeah.
You know, everybody has 2 kidneys, and if you match somebody, you can actually take a kidney from somebody else and replace yours with theirs. And so we start this campaign. It was called Make Dano Great Again.
Yes.
And we went online. We started an online campaign trying to find donors, trying to find people to be tested to donate a kidney to me.
Yeah.
And I'm going over to Pittsburgh, and I'm reaching out to them all the time, and I'm trying to get people tested. And I end up I have 17 people signed up to get tested to see if they could donate their kidney to me. And I end up getting, like, the first 8, there's no matches. And people are actually finding out that they're having other health problems, and they have issues too, so they can't donate their kidney to me. So it's kind of nice they get a free health screening, you know. But as I'm going through this and I'm trying to find a donor, and I get one and I get them signed up, and then I find out they don't match. Yeah. And then I get another one signed up, and then I find out they have some other health issue and they can't do it. Yeah. So I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do, and this is another tough time for me to get through.
Yeah. And let me just speak to this time, because this was one of the times you and I became we started growing very close in our friendship.
Right.
And literally, think about when you're really excited to get something, and then you don't get it.
Yeah.
But I want you to think now that you're really excited to get something that's going to save your life 17 times. That you have hope, and then it's gone. And then you have hope, and then it's gone. And, you know, when we first started this out, we were thinking, hey, how is this going to even be? And many of you remember when Donald Trump did Make America Great Again. Right. Dano said, well, let's make Dano great again. I need a kidney. And I watched someone who I love and that I'm close with, and that's a friend of mine. I watched him for 2 years, the last 2 years, struggle with this whole thing. I watched his health. I watched him not be able to do the things he loves, because for every other day for 2 years, you had to go to dialysis. Right. So, and you got to understand, tell them a little bit how dialysis makes you feel and what goes into this.
So when you go to dialysis, you have all this fluid on you that you've gained for everything you've eaten and drank the day before. So you get in there, they weigh you, and they decide how much fluid they have to take off, and it's usually about 5 or 6 pounds. You know that what you
5 or 6 pounds.
Yeah, what you gain like in a like 24-hour, 36-hour period. Wow. You know, depending on how much you eat and drink. So I'm there, and they hook you up to the machine, which is involved with very large needles. Yeah. Which I have a graph in my arm that they put in with.
Yeah, because a lot of the kids will ask you, hey, what's that on your arm?
Yeah. So it's a vein and an artery that's connected. So that way you have all your blood flow going through that vein all at once. Not all at once, but like continually and as much as you can at one time. Yeah. So when they put the needles in, they're able to draw all that blood out, and they can get your blood clean within like a 3-hour period. So when you go in there, you feel like crap because you have gained all this weight. You can't go to the bathroom. You can't get rid of it. So your hands are puffy again. Your eyes are puffy. In your chest, you have a hard time breathing sometimes. You have fluid on your lungs. So there's a lot of hard issues there that you just feel miserable. And then you go to dialysis. You sit there for 3 hours. They clean out all your blood, get that fluid off, and then you're exhausted. Yeah. And you're just so tired. And then the next day you wake up and you feel great. And you're like, all right, everything's good. They got the fluid off. I'm good to go. And then by that night, it's all downhill again. And you're just like the vicious cycle of it, of gaining the fluid, losing the fluid, gaining the fluid, losing it. And you're feeling good, and then you're feeling like garbage again, you know. Yeah. And then when you get a call from Pittsburgh. They're like, hey, we think we have a kidney for you. Yeah. And you're like, I'm done with this place. I'm done with dialysis, you know? Yeah. And you get over there, and I made it all the way to the outside the OR before, and they're like, you're not getting it, you know? And I'm like, oh, man.
So you literally drove 2 hours to the hospital. You're in the parking lot, and
IV
then they call you and say, hey, this isn't a match.
I mean, I made it in the hospital, had IVs in my arm, ready to go into surgery. I'm in the hospital gown, on the stretcher and everything, and they're like, we can't do it. Yeah. And then I'm like, oh, man, not only that I'm not getting it today, but now I have to go back to dialysis tomorrow and go through that all again, too.
And this was a cycle that really went on for 2 years because prior to this, you were scheduled to come here and speak.
Right.
He was actually 2 years ago, he was scheduled to be here to speak, and it was right before all of this happened. Right. And Dano, how many surgeries have you had?
I had 41.
41 surgeries in his life. I mean, I don't know. I mean, there are probably some of us in this that never had surgery in this room. And so you've had 41 surgeries.
Yeah.
So, well, tell them how the story goes. How it ends.
So we finally get to the, it's actually this past September, and I get another call from Pittsburgh. Well, let's back up a little bit. So I was studying the Bible, and it about being, if you're waiting on a blessing, the best thing you can do is bless others.
Yes.
So I get this idea that I want to pour a blessing on some people. And even though I'm not feeling well and I'm waiting for this kidney to come, I'm like, what can I do to help other people?
Yeah.
And so I decide to go to the grocery store, and I'm going to buy groceries for people. So I'm going to spend the day, no matter what it costs. I'm going to wait, and as people come through the line, I'm just going to take care of their grocery bill for the day.
Wow.
And I do that over here at Martin's. And I spent the day, and I was able to help out like 40 different families and things like that, for their groceries for the day.
And some of these families were in need.
Yeah, right.
Big time.
Oh, and it was so awesome because as I'm doing it, I have people coming up to me and they're like, "Oh, you don't understand. Like, this means so much to me," or "You don't understand what I'm going through." And I was able to tell them, like, "Let me explain to you why I'm doing this, you know, and why I need a kidney and things like that." And then they're able to tell me a little bit what's going on in their life, and we're able to share the love of Christ, right there in the grocery store.
Yeah.
And like, hey, God has brought me through all this, but now I need God to help me get through this. And, I'll pray for you that this, you'll be able to get through your situation as well. So we do this, we film a little video, we put it online the following week, and I posted it at like 9 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And at 10:30, I get a call from Pittsburgh saying there's a kidney available. And I'm like, really? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, well, I've been down this road before, so I didn't want to get too excited.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, well, we'll call you. They said, we'll call you back in a couple hours once we know everything's good to go.
Yeah.
So then I'm waiting all day. I'm at work, and I'm trying to stay busy, so I'm not thinking about it, And it's like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. They call me back, and they say, it's a match. It's good to go. Come on over.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Not only we just posted this video about waiting on a blessing and blessing others, and I get this call for this kidney the same day.
Yeah.
And how awesome it was. And I get over to Pittsburgh, and I'm still kind of doubting. I'm like, are you sure I'm getting it? Are you sure it's mine?
Yeah.
And I'm waiting all that night, and I'm checking with the doctors and nurses like all night, like, what's going on? Are we still good to go?
Yeah.
At any moment, are they going to come in and say you're out? Or something happened. And so the next morning, I'm laying in the hospital, and they come in, and they're like, well, your kidney missed its flight. And I'm like, what? How does that happen? And the kidney was supposed to come on the first flight. It was coming from the state of Texas, and it was going to be flown into me, and it missed its flight. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And they're like, but don't worry, it's going to be on the next flight. You're still going to get it. And if in the kidneys that are out of the body, when somebody passes away and they're able to take their organs, they only have like a certain window before that organ is no longer good.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think how many hours, and everything. And they're like, it's going to be really close, but we'll get it here. And like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you can go to the next slide there. And they decide that I'm going to get the kidney. And then they schedule it. This is actually the board from my room in my hospital bed, or my hospital room. And they got the schedule there for 4 o'clock. And I'm ready to go and everything. And they take me down to the OR. And I'm still like, okay, I've been here before too. Yeah. Are we sure, and everything? And they're like, yeah, you're good to go. You're good to go. And they take me to the OR, and I actually get to see the organ. It's pretty cool. They had it there on the table, and I'm like, hey, is that my kidney? And they're like, that's your kidney, man. And I'm like, okay, I'm glad it's here. You're like, we're good to go, And then they knocked me out. They put the kidney in, and then from that instant on,
you felt great.
I felt amazing. It was just unbelievable how that changed my life. Yeah. Getting that new organ. And being able to, everything was kind of, being regulated again and starting to feel good. And then, and I was in the hospital like 3 days. It's unbelievable. And just couldn't have gone better.
Yeah. And now here you are.
Yeah, here I am.
Sharing about this.
Yeah.
If there is one thing that you could leave with these students from the story of these last 30-some years and what you experience, trials, tribulations, all these things, what are you going to tell them?
First, I'm going to tell them that you should never give up, obviously. Things, trials and situations are going to come up in your life and you might feel sad about, or struggles that you're going through. But always got to give your best and try to get through those things. But more importantly than that even is you have to rely on God. And when you rely on God, you can't rely on God just on the small things. It's also, or not just the big things, but the small things too. You know, and even if you're having just a bad day and having a bad attitude, you can ask God to change that. You know, you can say, hey, God, you know, I'm having a really bad day. Somebody's making me really upset at school today, or making me upset at work, or my mom's making me upset. You know, just give that to God right away, and God's going to change that. You know, and that's the biggest thing that I've learned in my whole life is that my faith has grown because I've been able to see God work in my life, and I hope that's what I've been able to share with you guys today too. Is you've been able to see how God has brought me through all these different things to where I am today, where I can tell my story, which is God's story. Yeah. And as you guys go through different things, you'll be able to tell people like, hey, look what God has done in my life. Yeah. Look at what God has brought me through. You know, I was having this issue going on when I was in high school, but you know what? I gave it to God, and God got me through it. Yeah. And you're going to run into other people, or you might have kids one day that are going through those problems, and you're going to be say, hey, let's just give it to God because, you know, you have that experience and you've seen God work. Yeah. Amen. Well, Dano, will you just pray over us, pray over the kids, and then we'll open it up for some questions and things like that. Yeah. God, you're awesome, and we love you. We just want to thank you for tonight, Lord. We want to thank you for Refuge and each one of these students that have come here tonight, Lord. Just want to lift up everything that's going on in their lives, Lord. You know their hearts and where they are, Lord, with you and what's going on at home and at school, Lord. We just ask you to touch each one tonight. Take away those burdens, Lord, that are on their lives, Lord. Help them to get through things. Help them to see you and recognize that they can give everything that they're going through to you. Help them to understand that, God, you'll never leave them or forsake them. And, Lord, I thank you so much for Micah and this ministry, Lord. We just pray that you would bless this time that we all have here tonight. Thank you for what you've done in my life and this opportunity I have to share with these kids, Lord. Just help us to have a great day. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Amen.